Hello again, everyone. I'm Dr. George Simon, and welcome to another edition of Character Matters, the program where we talk about what I consider to be the defining issue of our time, the character crisis that we have faced for several decades now, and that affects so many aspects of our lives. And today we're going to be talking about, we're going to be continuing a discussion on the nature of genuine love, but we're going to be talking especially about magnetic personalities. I wrote a post about them on my blog at drgeorgesimon.com. These are the folks that are naturally engaging, that draw you like a magnet. They have certain characteristics that make them easy to get along with, easy to know, fun to be with, etc., etc. And many times at the beginning of a relationship, you can really find some folks um, a powerful draw, but that does not necessarily mean that they have the character capacity to properly regard you in a relationship. It takes way more than being a congenial individual with good social skill, et cetera, to be a decent relationship partner and one who will be faithful to you and uh, truly help you forge a wholesome, intimate relationship. So that's what we're going to be talking about today. You can also find information about that topic in all of my books, but most especially Essentials for the Journey. Essentials for the Journey really focuses on all of the character qualities that you have to develop over your lifetime to be able to reach that point where you can genuinely positively regard another person in a relationship. It's all about wholesomeness of character. And as I've said many times, we human beings are not naturally wholesome creatures. We have to learn to be good characters. A part of that has to do, part of the challenge of that has to do with our makeup. And then another part of that has to do with the environments that we were shaped in and the environments that we operate in. A lot of things contribute to that. But over the last several decades, a vicious cycle has been churning whereby all manner of behavior and all manner of conduct within relationships, once highly unusual or regarded more universally as egregious or unacceptable, has become more commonplace, and we've become desensitized. And that is that as that has happened more and more often, it's had a negative impact on character. Culture affects character, and character in individuals helps comprise the culture, helps define the culture. It's a mutual relationship. And this negative, vicious cycle has been churning now for the last several decades, and it's really cost us, especially in the area of intimate relationships, which is why so many of them turn out to be disappointing, if not toxic, and end in heartbreak, even though they seem to hold such promise in the beginning. As you might tell, I'm already struggling with some vocal cord destruction. That was a good misspeak. Some vocal cord issues, dysfunction that I sometimes struggle with. So I may be quite a bit raspy today. And because I have to force myself to speak, I sometimes misspeak. But we'll do our best today. And I invite you to join the conversation. You can participate in the chat live there on YouTube. You can also enter the studio by following the link that you see scrolling at the bottom of the screen. You can also find the link in the latest blog post at the bottom of the page by going to the blog at drgeorgesimon.com and the article on magnetic personalities right down at the bottom. There's a link to follow to enter the studio and participate live. Ask your questions and participate in the discussion. We have someone already in the waiting room, a frequent visitor to Character Matters. So once Caroline gets back on her camera, I will add her to the stage as well. And I see we have a couple of other folks that are waiting who haven't indicated just yet that they want to be part of the discussion. And as soon as they do, I will add them as well. So I hope we have a good discussion about magnetic personalities and how some can actually also be really good characters, capable of having very wholesome relationships with you and capable of helping you grow and experience genuine love. But that is not a prerequisite. So, Caroline, I'm going to go ahead and add you to the stage. Welcome to Character Matters. Good to see you again.
Same here.
I was just saying, and I see that Brent is come into the waiting room too. Always good to see him. So I'm going to add him to the stage. Good morning, Brent. How are you this morning?
I'm doing great also.
Good to see you. Good to see you. So I'm just curious. When I wrote this article on magnetic personalities, there are some folks who are just naturally engaging. They have some innate characteristics that help them engage. Many times they tend to be more extroverted, the outgoing type that connects easily with others. And they also derive a lot of energy from their interactions with others. That's what really fills them up. To be with others and to engage is what gives life meaning for them. So it's easy. And some of these folks are really easy to talk to. They make it seem like they've known you your whole life. They seem genuinely interested in you, and they can actually be genuinely interested in you. And I've had many conversations with folks at workshops who take issue with my perspective that those qualities in and of themselves are not indicators of wholesomeness in a relationship. Most people say, how in the world do you have good social skill, high emotional intelligence, knowing what's going on with a person just kind of intuitively? How do you have all those characteristics about you and not necessarily be a loving character or someone who will make a great relationship partner? And if it weren't so natural to be attracted to such people, why would there be any cause for concern? So I had many folks at workshops take issue with me until we had a more robust discussion. And as I mentioned in the article on the blog, some of the most character evolved people are also naturally engaging, are magnetic personalities. Some of the most revered spiritual teachers, very centered individuals who have reached a degree of enlightenment. Some of these folks are naturally magnetic, but the vice versa is not necessarily true. You can have these qualities and still be much more about yourself and your self-interest. And that's what makes the difference. That's what makes the difference when you're vetting a potential relationship partner, somebody who's going to have your best interest at heart. So I don't know if either one of you have had any type of experience like that with a particularly engaging character who at the front end of the relationship seemed just the kind of person you'd like to be with, just the kind of person you'd like to hang out with, enjoyed being with, almost couldn't wait till the next opportunity, and then revealed themselves later to be not the person you had hoped they would be. Anybody had an experience like that? I see you shaking your head, Brad.
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. Wow, there's so much that could be said here, but you're spot on that there are persons that are really good in social settings, for example. They can be the life of the party, they can make persons laugh, um, and they can even be a good listening ear to you, as you express your grievances, etc. Um, but as you said, and quite rightly, those are not necessarily skills that prove that this person has good character, right?
Yeah.
Um, most people study other people and how to get along with them, and they can figure out, okay, if I listen to people, if I give them a listening ear, you know, that's a good thing to do, you know. Um, but to ultimately get to your question, what your concern here, what what differentiates them in terms of having morality or not? Um, I think one of those answers is how something you talked about in your books too. The work of character development is just that work, WORK, right? It's hard, it's very sacrificial. You have to deny yourself. And to me, what allows you to see if a person is of good character or not is their willingness to put in the work. Okay, so let me just give a quick example and I'll pass it back over to you.
Sure.
You give someone, you go to someone for advice, and let's just say you've been through trauma or something like that. They have the listening ear, but can they go the extra distance to say, okay, let me help you, let me discomfort myself to address some of the issues that you're having? And sometimes, Dr. Simon, that's the real thing. These persons with great magnetic characteristics, how able are they to go beyond their comfort zone? To me, that is a proof of whether they have character or not.
Yeah. Oh, wow. I mean, there's so many of the things that you mentioned there are relevant to this topic, and your question begs some close consideration. You mentioned the WORK, that four-letter word that folks of disturbed character really have take issue with. I have several articles on this, and I mention it in my book, Essentials for the Journey. Love is a four-letter word. So is work. And there's a certain kind of work, there's a certain kind of labor that really defines love. And that is putting yourself out there on another's behalf. When you have the qualities to engage well, when it excites you, when you get all of your energy from and you're thrilled at the very prospect of engaging with others. In other words, it's fun. Folks who are naturally outgrowing find it really energy charging to be with people, to be interested in people, to know what's going on in their lives. This gives them energy. So, this is really a very selfish thing. It's not really putting oneself out there in any way, it's not work, it's energizing, it's tantalizing, it's invigorating. It gives a person energy. They like to do it. You and your issues and your very way of being bring them joy when they're involved with you, and this can be mutually very satisfying. They want to be with you, and you want to be with them because they want to be with you. Um, that doesn't really say anything about their capacity to labor on your behalf, to really care for you, and not just affectionately, but the work that's involved uh, in really helping to make another person's life okay. So what really tells the story is the history. And with really engaging, likable, agreeable, lovable, charismatic, charming folks, what you really almost hate to do most of the time at the outset of a relationship is to carefully vet the history, to look at what intimate relationships were like, how long they lasted, especially how they ended, because that tells a bigger story. So I know that's not a complete answer to your question, but maybe it doesn't even address all that you wanted to say. But those labors of love, how willing a person is to do the work that it takes to properly nurture a relationship. Just think of it. This is not really a fair analogy, but perhaps there's no love more natural under most circumstances than a parent's love for a child, especially a very young child. But caring for that child is the duty associated with that, the responsibilities associated with that are a real chore. And you have to have the mindset to not just do it. Boy, when you do it begrudgingly, uh, the person on the other end really knows it. But when you do it with the right heart, when you yourself are free of other issues and can really devote your energy to the well being of that child, they know the difference. They know that for you, that labor of love is truly a loving labor, and that you don't have resentment about it. It's freely chosen and freely given. And there's nothing more mutually growing than that kind of a relationship. The child thrives and develops more wholesomely, and you develop in the giving and in the doing. You also grow positively. So even though that's not a completely fair example, because there's a power dynamic there between a relatively helpless and more innocent child, it's still there is a parallel with any good wholesome relationship. It's the giving, and the giving freely for the welfare of another. Generally speaking, the folks who so naturally engage and are naturally engaging are in it for what they get. Now, that doesn't mean that they're not capable of more, but just because someone is a heck of a lot of fun and fills you up to be with is not a reliable indicator of their capacity to love you. And if I have learned anything in years and years and years of counseling, it's that mistake, that very mistake I'm talking about, was made at the outset of the relationship. And it's mind-boggling when the person, it creates a real dissonance when the person starts to realize something about their relationship that tells them that this person is really not capable of loving them, because they wonder how it could have been so wonderful at the beginning. They all tell me the same thing. It seemed like we talked for hours. It seemed like we just knew each other right off the bat. We shared such similar likes. They were so interested. They listened. And by the way, active listening is a quality of these folks. And it can be mistaken for a positive character trait. It can be associated with positive character. You could, when you really sincerely care about someone and want to work on their behalf, you do listen. But just because somebody has that skill and just because they engage in that behavior is not an automatic indication. Yes, Caroline, you had a comment there?
Well, a question like, so how do you vet people at the beginning of a relationship? I mean, as you say, they listen to you, you feel like you've known them forever, you're happy with them. Those are all indicators, right? That you can't go off the work yet that somebody puts in because it's the beginning of a relationship. So you don't have that to look at. There's no
Yeah.
history yet because you just met someone. So, and all the other signs are positive. So, what are additional ways in the beginning of a relationship to vet someone?
Boy, that's a great, great question. And let me tell you one of the most common circumstances that I've heard over the years. I will hear that at the outset of the relationship, when everything just seems to be clicking, and you just can't wait to be in one another's company again, you start asking questions about the history. Couple of red flags. Oh yeah, I had a relationship with him or her, but it was just the wrong person. They this or they that. Never I this or I that. Always them. Red flag number one. Red flag number two. I don't like to talk about it. In other words, none of your business what my last relationship looked like, what we went through, how it started, how it ended, why it ended, all that stuff. Big red flag. And I can't tell you the number of times that's happened. I would virtually, I would be willing to say that virtually 80% of the failed marriage and failed relationship uh, sessions that I've had that dynamic going on at the beginning. That there was just not a real careful analysis of prior relationships. Everybody has prior relationships, whether it be with members of their family, their parents, their children, maybe from a prior relationship. That's where the story lies. And they've almost always got an answer for why it went wrong. But if you're not hearing, this is what I think I did, that I could have done a lot better. If that's what you're not hearing, boy, be careful. Boy, be careful. I know I'm not completely answering the question, but
No, you do. So it's why you don't have to work on the history yourself yet. They have to work on the history with other people. And so that's what you then look at, like within that history with other people before you, be it relationships with family or partners. You kind of really look for, did they put the work in? Did they take responsibility for their actions? So
yes.
it does actually ties together what Brent said. Actually does make sense now.
Yeah. Kent is saying here, how does a person take on or start a deep investigation into self? I ask this because I believe we can only operate in authenticity as deeply as we are authentic and honest with ourselves. Oh my goodness. Such wisdom right there. And that is the truth of it. And I talk about that in one chapter of Essentials for the Journey, pretty much in depth. This may seem like a tangent, but I find that psychologists and social workers and counselors of various persuasions have what I would call sometimes a relatively shallow or sometimes an even incorrect understanding of the most important concepts in the field of mental health. One of these has to do with a term that I'm sure you've heard before, and that is denial. As originally conceptualized by Sigmund Freud, denial is an unconscious and primitive and powerful protective mechanism. It's not something you think of, it's not something you actively, consciously do. It's something your mind does for you to protect you against unbearable pain, pain that you can't yet fully tolerate, emotional pain. So unconscious kicks in, puts up a barrier to you, fully appreciating consciously the reality of a situation that's too painful to bear. And when the time is right and when you can bear it, then the barrier comes down. Denial is not the same as lying to yourself because you're not prepared to honestly acknowledge what's going on with you, because you're inauthentic even with yourself. And when you can't be authentic with yourself, because image is more important than reality, and you're determined to hold on to a constructed image that serves some purpose for you, that's not the same as unconscious denial. So most of the time, not all the time, but most of the time, in my experience, and I taught this in workshops for years, most of the time, helping professionals will waste considerable time and energy waiting for individuals who were never in the psychological state of denial to come out of it. When in fact, most of the time, what we really need to do is benignly, lovingly insist upon authenticity. Many times, I was taught as a therapist, for example, not to ask why questions, not to go directly to somebody's motivation. Why? Theoretically, because they will automatically go on the defensive and unconscious denial mechanisms will click into place. What I have found is most of the time, when you ask why and you get something like, I don't know, it never really means, I don't know. It can mean, I don't like to talk about it. It can mean, I haven't given it that much thought. It can mean, if I tell you, I'm going to feel some embarrassment, maybe even some shame. And so I don't want to do that right now. It can mean all kinds of things, but it rarely, if ever, means I don't know. And that in itself is an untruth, is a lie. And you can't make progress in the journey of love and in the journey of self-authenticity when you can't be square or when you choose not to be square. So I always urge folks in counseling not to operate under the presumption that they have to walk on eggshells and they have to be very careful. And they have to waste all this time and energy because they will necessarily invite resistance if they address issues openly. It's not the what, it's the how. I can't stress that enough. Folks naturally have, I think, an internal radar most of the time. Their backgrounds can be so full of trauma that they misinterpret. But generally speaking, folks have some kind of intuition about when another person means them nothing but well. In other words, when there's nothing really to be apprehensive about in your engagement with somebody else. And like I said, that's not always true because some people are the product of such incredible trauma that they have great difficulty believing that anyone or any circumstance can be non-threatening. So that's a reality too. Not discounting that. Yes, Brent.
Yes. I wanted to touch back on the comment made that you read just now, about how do I become more authentic. Um, First of all, let me say just before we touch on the how, it is so valuable to be an authentic person, as painful as that may be. And you have to go through some things. You have to go through some uncomfortable truths. Um, but one of the benefits at the end, or on the other side of that project, is now that you have an appreciation for the kind of work it takes to confront yourself and to have good character. It's not easy for the persons that you're speaking about here today, Dr. Simon, which is these persons with all the charm and stuff. It's not easy for them to pull wool over your eyes, because you yourself know the kind of effort it takes to give good character. So you're not going to be taken by appearances as much. At some point, you're going to start to ask the harder questions, which is to
Right.
go back into the history of that person and ask them, how have they dealt with their parents, how have they dealt with their children, how
Right.
have they dealt with people who have offended them.
Exactly.
And this touches on, to some extent, what Caroline asked earlier. How do
Right.
you vet people like
Right.
this?
Right.
You have
Right.
to ask
Yes.
those more important questions.
Right. And to amplify that, as I mentioned, it's not the what. You have to ask those questions. That's part of learning the truth. And the truth has to prevail, because the truth is what heals and sets you free. I'm not the first person to say that. The truth will set you free. It will. Now, the how is the most important part. If I ask the question, and every bit of my nonverbal behavior also says, my voice tone, my facial expression, in asking the question, if all that nonverbal behavior says, boy, you better have the right answer, otherwise you're a real fool, or I suspect, some nefarious thing, or I'm going to be disappointed if you give this answer or that answer. If that's coming across naturally, the person is not going to feel very comfortable being authentic, either with themselves or with you. It's rarely about the what, it's about the how. And a while back, I was given just a little insight that I value perhaps more than anything I've been given recently, and that is a little thought planted in my head about every granted moment, every given moment, representing a test of intention. So, one of the things that really matters, especially in some kind of therapeutic engagement, is the what's going on right here, right now awareness. Because growth and change, if it's ever going to take place or it's ever going to be fostered, always happens in the here and now. One of the big red flags in a therapy that's likely to go virtually nowhere or go haywire is when you're giving tasks for later, Yeah, I know this did not go too well, but take this home and do this, or do this later, or I've got an assignment for you, all well and good. But if change or growth is really going to take place, it's going to take place in the here and now. I see that Kent is in the waiting room. It looks like he might want to participate or ask a question or contribute a thought, but I'm not seeing his device connected yet, so I'll keep an eye on that. But he really spurred something there with that question. What a great question about authenticity. I think it bodes well for both parties in a relationship, including in a therapeutic relationship, perhaps even most especially in a therapeutic relationship. Authenticity is the key. People, as I mentioned, kind of know, unless they are products of such damaging early trauma, people kind of had internal radar for when there's love in the room, genuine positive regard in the room. And most folks also, this is interesting. I wrote about this in my first book, and Gavin de Becker wrote a great book called The Gift of Fear about this phenomenon too. People also have an intuitive sense of when they are in danger or where there is something potentially dangerous about a relationship, but they often don't trust their instinct. Some people will say that they felt the hair on the back of their head stand up when somebody did something or said something in the context of a relationship, but they dismissed it. They didn't trust what was going on. They didn't trust their feeling. They thought maybe they were misperceiving things. And generally, you find that in folks who have difficulty trusting their intuition to begin with. But I think most of the time, we have a good set of internal radar about when it's safe and when it isn't safe. And we need to pay attention to that more often. I see you shaking your head about that. It looks like Kent might be having some difficulty, so I'll just kind of keep my eye on that. But great question. Thank you so much, Kent, for making that statement and asking that question. Well, I'm going to be wrapping things up here in just a few moments. We're scheduled today for about 40 minutes. And right now it looks like we have 2 minutes to go. So I thought I'd give either one of you a chance to say anything that you might want to say before I have some concluding remarks.
You can go ahead, Caroline, if you'd like.
I actually know I'm still processing kind of like what you said. So I'm still like on that.
Yeah.
Got you.
Well,
I have a quick closing comment.
Yes.
It is so. You see, the thing is, we've kind of asserted this in earlier sessions. The world is such a place that it's difficult to find people with true motives. There's a kind of scarcity thing happening with love these days,
Right.
and we have to appreciate that not all persons that present as wanting to help you or wanting to love you are genuine,
Are genuine.
right? And we have to be that poses a problem for us who are looking for the genuine article, right? I'm just saying, just to answer Caroline's earlier question, we just have to be real about people's potential to be evil or good, right? It's not just an automatic thing. So when I meet somebody and they're just lovely to be with and stuff like that, I don't get consumed in that thought. I weigh the potential, right? And I say, okay, let me get some further proof before we move forward. Or if I am to invest in a relationship, it has to be based on some serious factors.
Well, if I can perhaps a little bit oversimplistically sum up here what I hear being said, Brent, is that character matters. It always has. It always will. And if it were easy to come by, everybody would do it. But it's what we're all looking for. We're all looking for wholesomeness and for real meaning in our life. And if you want to put it very simply, one of the biggest reasons why folks don't seem to be valuing it enough and why folks don't seem to be developing it enough. This may sound trite, but I think there's a lot of depth in it, actually. In our day and time, given all of the things present in our culture that dominate our culture, all the things we have, we don't have to. There's no real pressure on us because people of really nefarious character seem to be getting along just fine. Actually, sometimes even championed for their ways, rewarded for their ways. It's not required so much anymore. And when things aren't demanded, then things aren't produced. It's really pretty much that simple. And perhaps that sets the stage for our future discussions. So once again, I want to thank everybody for participating and for those tuning in and for those who will access the recording of the live stream. There's going to be a change on Facebook with regard to how long videos and other recorded things stay. So what I will be doing on my channel and on Facebook also is I will be downloading this month all of the prior recordings and packaging them in a playlist and putting them up separately on the channel so that people can access any of the other prior programs. So once again, thanks for tuning in, everyone. Thank you, Brent, and thank you, Caroline, for your participation.
Thank you.
Always great to see you. Thank you, Kent, for your wonderful question and for thinking about popping in there. And for all of you making the comments, I'm sorry I didn't get to them all. Once again, we'll see you again next time on the next live edition of Character Matters, the third Wednesday of the month, the first and third Wednesdays at noon Central Time. See you then. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.